Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are. Whenever it is for you, for me, it is just past midnight on Tuesday, August the 5th, which makes this the news and events for Monday, August the 4th, day 1258 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and I'm coming to you live at 5 from this major European capital, currently under siege. And we are under an air alert tonight, guys. Amazingly, over the weekend, we did not see a scaled missile and drone attack against the territory of Ukraine. This was the first weekend in 2 months that we didn't have at least one night of 250 plus drones coming in. So I'm well rested, is the point. That's for sure. There's Van. Hey, everybody thank Van. Van, after hanging around here like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a bum for 2 years, finally joined the Patreon. Thanks, Van. I really appreciate it. It makes a big difference. Hey, Daryl Roberts. So be like Van. Join the Patreon. Hey, Roy Daniels, happy Monday. Hey, Richard Prexis, evening, Jasmine. Lil Red, how you doing? Hey, Hardley, Akron. Black Panther, how you doing? Hey, Jackie, DJ. Van, I'm glad you got a good sense of humor, pal. Bright-eyed and ponytailed, that's me. Hey, David Keller. And everybody, there's Arna, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Everybody thank Arna for us. Guys, Van joined the Patreon today. Arn is a regular sponsor of this channel. I literally could not do it without the Patreon folks and the live sponsors. So if anybody wants to sponsor tomorrow night, PayPal's in the direction, or in the bio there. And it would be great to have somebody who's never sponsored a live step up and sponsor live. That would be great. So big thanks to Arna, who is sponsoring tonight. And let's take a look at the news. So last night was one of those rare nights where the Ukrainian armed forces were like on fire in the defense of this nation. 161 out of 162 drones shot down or suppressed with active countermeasures. 99% drone interception rate last night. And that's good news for everybody, right? That the Ukrainians handily removed the threat from the sky of over 150 drones. However, the one Kinzhal that got fired, right? The one Kinzhal hypersonic missile. Hey, Jacob Grady. That got through. Of course it did. Because the Russians fired it someplace where there's no Patriots. And that's why the Ukrainians are so desperate to get their hands on those Patriots. 14 Patriot systems, according to the administration in Kyiv, would give a basic protection for the major population centers across the country. 14 is the bare minimum. We believe the Ukrainians are currently in possession of 11. So we're getting there, clawing our way to that. But at the rate that things are going, it's going to be the 1st of January before we see 13 in this country. Right now, there are 13 pledged. Another 2 are coming in from Germany. But we'll see. Josie says, is it true about their bridge today? Now, Josie, I would assume you are talking about, those Kinzhals are like $5 million a piece, right? So you need $1 million Patriot if you want to intercept them. They come in at like Mach 4 or something. Like, really a tough thing to shoot them down. But the Patriots do. We had one night here in Kyiv where the Ukrainians took out 4 Kinzhals in one night. 4 out of 4, baby. So in the right place, with the right air defense, you can get it. Hey, Tommy Weber. So, hey, Norbert. So to go back to Josie's question, is it true about the bridge? Now, Josie, I can only assume that you're talking about the bridge in Bryansk. So, and because this is a great story, I mean, it's really such a great story, right? So Bryansk borders Ukraine up by Sumy in the north central part of Ukraine. Bryansk is just across the border. 7 miles, right about 11 kilometers over the border was a bridge. I say was because there is not a bridge there now. The reason there is not a bridge there now, hey Jake, hey Truthful, hey Neil, boy, all the peeps are here tonight. Just across the border in Bryansk is a bridge. There's no bridge there anymore because the Ukrainians blowed it up. But the amazing thing is how they blew it up. They blew it up, correct, David Yeager. David Yeager says the Russians are paranoid. The Russians are paranoid. Great and mighty Russia that never been defeated, which is a load of shit if you know anything about the Sino-Russian wars or the First Chechen War, or the list goes on and on. Russians have been beaten plenty of times. But the mythology that these guys have, right, that they're indestructible, that nobody can invade Russia, blah, 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 they're so paranoid that the Ukrainians are going to invade, that they have strapped tank mines to lots of the bridges. They mine their own bridge, Bip. They mine their own bridge, right? So they could blow it in the face of overwhelming Ukrainian invasion. As if the Ukrainian... Anyway, it doesn't matter. So there is this amazing video of a Ukrainian FPV drone flying up to the bridge, flying under the bridge, and the last thing the FPV drone shows us before it smashes into them is a line of mines on the bridge. Now, I thought they were anti-tank mines. It turns out, I forget exactly the type of mine. But I did see it. I don't believe they were anti-tank mines. They were some other kind of mine used for these kinds of chained demolition explosions. So for very little money, very, very cost effectively, the Ukrainians took out a bridge that supplies, that does ammunition, food, water, and medical resupply to the Russian northern contingents, the Russians in Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod. Critical supply bridge. Dig it? Now let's contrast that to the bridge that the Russians blew up over the weekend, because it's a very different situation. Down in Kherson is taking a beating. The Russians are just hitting Kherson with everything that they've got. And you know that the civilian population there has been used as lab rats to train drone operators. Drone operators literally fly drones into bus stops and buses and civilians on bicycles to train their drone operators. It's a war crime, first of all. It is also perverse and sadistic in its nature. It's a human safari going on down there in Kherson. Now, the bridge that the Russians blew in Kherson, they hit it with 2 of those Fab 500 glide bombs. The bridge, hey Parda, hey Courtney Davis, the bridge connected one part of Kherson City to another part of Kherson City, the district of Korbel, basically. That's not the right pronunciation, I'm sorry. But it's like Korbel. So it's a district in the southwest part of Kherson City. And and there's another river there that flows into the Dnipro. So it's on the other side of that river. The Russians blew that bridge. Now, did that bridge have military significance? No. The only thing it did was isolate a handful of Ukrainian civilians who now can no longer get food or water. I mean, that's what it is. So they put under siege probably several thousand Ukrainians who now are cut off from food and water supplies and are being evacuated. The striking difference between the Russians using these huge bombs to cut off a neighborhood of civilians from basic humanitarian aid, like we're seeing happen in Gaza, versus the Ukrainians who use the enemy's own explosives and tactics against them to take out a bridge that is crucial to Russian resupply efforts of its military, its ability to prosecute the war, is in microcosm the story of this war writ large. The Russians have their focus on making the people of Ukraine submit to their will, while the Ukrainians are doing everything they can to undermine the aggressor's ability to prosecute this war. That's the fundamental distinction between the aggressor and the defender in this conflict. Now, on this subject of the two sides, the Kremlin today, Dmitry Peskov, Kremlin spokesperson, said that Putin is ready to meet Zelensky as long as Kyiv does its homework. So it's never going to happen, right? The excuse for why it's never going to happen was built into Peskov's statement that preparations have to be made at the expert level, is the exact quote from Peskov. Preparations have to be made at the expert level. Now, what is the expert level? I don't know. Security, right? Assurances to Putin that Zelensky won't attack him over the table and murder him with his bare hands, which I'm sure. Look, Putin hates Zelensky and fears him more than any other person on earth. In all of Putin's life, the only personification of anybody that has stood up to him is Zelensky. And for 4 years now, this is going on. So I don't believe for 1 second that Putin is ever going to sit down with Zelensky. This appears to me to be yet another delay tactic of the Kremlin, while it attempts so desperately to achieve its military aims in the Donbass. And that is not going well. It's certainly not going to happen this summer. They may not even take Pokrovsk this summer, although there is a lot of pressure on Pokrovsk. Okay, so I don't think Putin and Zelensky are going to meet, but they are talking about it once again. On the international scene, all eyes are on India. I mean, Donald Trump turned around and punched India in the face with his 25% tariffs. Oh, and what he's saying is he's going to make the tariffs even higher if they don't stop buying Russian oil. The problem is that India needs cheap energy. And it's my opinion that as long as they're buying oil from Russia under the price cap, they should be allowed to buy as much of it as they want. Help keep down global prices. Let them refine it all and make the money that Russia's not making. I don't have a problem with any of that. Trump seems to have a big problem. He's hoping that his pressure on India to stop buying Russian oil will cut off the supply of money that Putin so desperately needs to be able to continue to prosecute his war. It's my opinion, as I have shared on here many times, that the 100% price or the 100% tariffs that Trump is talking about putting on India and Russia, that will never happen. It's an empty threat. Taco baby, Trump always chickens out. He talks a big game, but he does not follow through. Now, for their part, the Indian government does seem to be stepping back from Russian oil. 60% of the oil refining in India happens through 4 Indian state-owned companies. Now, those state-owned companies stopped buying Russian oil. They signed no contracts for Russian oil 10 days for 10 days before Trump made his 25% tariff announcement. So how much the Indian state oil companies stepping back from buying Russian oil is actually attached to this tariff, I'm not even sure. The Indian Oil Corporation just wrote contracts for 7 million barrels of oil in September from the United States and from some Middle East suppliers. So 60% of the oil refining in India seems to have switched off of Russian oil entirely. The other 40% are private refiners. And it is interesting to me to see a market capitalist president trying to dictate socialist-style business practices to the private refineries in India. Don't you buy Russian oil? No. The state forbids it. So India seems to be in a situation, right? They're walking a tightrope, boy. They need that cheap Russian oil. They got 1.5 billion people to feed every day. They need that cheap energy. They're in a world that is hyper-modernizing. They need that cheap energy. And so you can't blame the Indians for doing business with the Russians when they're getting the oil at steep discounts. However, those discounts have been evaporating as the price of Russian oil keeps falling. I checked it today. It was at 65.43. Urals crude was at 65.43 a barrel. So above the price cap of $60. And that assumes that you're not taking into account the new price cap, which is supposed to be $47.15, which nobody is buying anywhere near that kind of rate. So 40%, the private portion of India's oil refining business appears to still be buying Russian oil, while the official government refineries, 60% of the refining capacity in India is no longer buying Russian oil. In fact, there are at least 4 shadow fleet tankers currently swimming in circles in the Indian Ocean because they were refused a port of call. They wouldn't let them dock. So it will be interesting to see how India threads this needle. Remember, China and India, while they may both be in BRICS, are not best friends either. They have bitter territorial disputes that often result in armed clashes on the shared border. Ristinen, I'm not aware of any EU sanctions that would impact this decision. Except the price cap, right? Which everybody is free to do business under or not. And the Indians are choosing not to, or have chosen not to up until now. This bullshit from Trump, which I am so strongly opposed to, a 25% across the board tax on everything from India is going to hurt the Indians, the Indian economy, badly. It is not going to do any favor to Indian products sold in the United States. That's for sure, right? Okay, so what else we got here? What does this say? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So when the Russians took over Crimea, Gazprom, the Russian state owned gas company, took over all of the Ukrainian state owned natural gas infrastructure in Crimea. They expropriated it, right? They seized it and began making money from it themselves. That included the gas wells, the gas pipelines, there were no LNG facilities, but that kind of thing, right? $5 billion worth of equipment, according to Nafto Gas. The Ukrainian state gas company sued Gazprom in The Hague and won a judgment of $5 billion. Now, the question is, how do you get that money back? And what the Ukrainians have been doing is going to national courts and appealing to the countries where the Russians have assets that they should be able to seize those assets and liquidate them to help satisfy this debt. And the first case has settled favorably in the Ukrainians' favor. So in Austria, Gazprom owns property, $120 million worth of property. The Austrian court has authorized the Austrian government to seize that property and turn it over to the Ukrainian natural gas company as part of the settlement for the stolen equipment and wells in Crimea. This is the first ruling of its kind, and we hope to see this ruling repeated in other European countries and those Russian assets to be seized and sold off in order to reimburse Naftogaz the $5 billion in its judgment. Thank you. Hey, Feisty. Hey, guys, just to be clear, right? We do not run any competitions here, any contests. Also, I will never try to sell you cryptocurrency. I just did a search for myself on TikTok this week. When I got on this platform, there were no Peter Alexeyev. There was one guy, a Belarusian guy. That was it. Now there's like a couple dozen Peter Alexeyeviches with all kinds of spellings. I am none of those. This is me. It is unlikely I am going to message you trying to sell you I will definitely not message you trying to sell you cryptocurrency. That is not me. Also, big heads up, guys. I am seeing a lot of these scammers who pretend to be Ukrainian armed forces, responding to your comments in the chats. I block them as quickly as I can. But please be aware, I don't know of any Ukrainian armed forces member who has the time to sit at TikTok and thank everybody for supporting Ukraine. That is not a thing. So if you see it, avoid it like the plague. This is my only account, Matthew. No, there is no backup. I'm not playing that game. If they want to ban me from the platform, they can ban me from the platform. I will not return. I will just transition to YouTube exclusively. That's all. Which I'm on YouTube. You should follow me there too. Now, would anyone like the top secret plans for Russia's latest nuclear submarine? Because you can have them. They have all been posted online by the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. It is now, I'm assuming that they're real, right? That it's not a psyop. And I think that because, frankly, it would be cheaper to steal them than it would be to invent them, because they're quite comprehensive. I mean, really quite comprehensive. Remember, this new submarine may be the latest and the greatest, but it's one of a family, the Boryev class. The documents that were revealed over the weekend by the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate include stress test information. That is to say, where the hull is weak, problems with propulsion, detailed investigations into damage that had occurred inside a missile launch tube, both the analysis of the damage, the cause of the damage, the cost for I mean, everything is there, the entire investigation. And it shows off all the warts in this sub, where it is restricted, where it is constrained in its functionality. And therefore, where all Boryev class subs are constrained. The crew manifest is amazing. Like, you have every crewman, their date of birth, their city of origin, their responsibilities, their emergency or rapid response responsibilities in certain situations. The whole command chart from the captain on down. Everything's in this thing. It's unbelievable. And the Russians, the fact that the Kremlin has remained silent about it, that they have not even, they have not even denied it or claimed it's a fake. Complete silence from the Kremlin on this. Somebody's going to be invited for tea. You just know that's the case. Now, look, we don't know how the GUR got these things. We don't know. They're not telling us. Might have been a spy, might have been a computer hack. We don't know. So we'll keep our eyes on that story if we get any more information. But right now, if you just Google submarine plans, Ukrainian GUR, you should find them, and you can download them all if you're a submarine fan. It's helpful if you speak Russian, too. Betty Thompson says, thanks for clarifying the scammer Ukrainian fighter military men just wanting to chat. Betty, I'll tell you, most of the Ukrainian fighters don't speak English. That's your first clue. If they're talking to you in English, that it's not likely to be a Ukrainian soldier. Now, lots of the Ukrainians do speak English, but what they do not have time for is to go down the list of comments and just thank everybody, which is what these scammers do, right? It's probably not even them doing it manually. It's probably an automated process. So it is a great find, this stuff about the submarine is amazing, I think. Now, over the weekend, it was really something. It was like impossible to keep up with what the Ukrainians were hitting. And I want to say, if you're on the Patreon, and if you follow this channel, you should be on the Patreon, because you can have a free Patreon account, right? Like, you just get a free account, you follow me on Patreon, and then you get my Patreon stuff too. And today I did a video about a half hour long about how the war is changing, how the Russians are increasingly desperate and taking it out on the civilian population, or surrendering en masse, not in ones and twos anymore, and how Ukrainian attacks against Russia have taken this like exponential curve over the last few months. It's amazing. And over the weekend, this weekend was definitely one of those weekends, boy. We saw three oil refineries have their cracking towers hit. The cracking tower is, as I understand it, the critical piece of oil refinery infrastructure where the magic happens, where the primary components of crude oil are separated into lighter gasoline and diesel and into heavier asphalt, etc. Without the cracking tower, you don't refine oil. And we saw 3 oil refineries hit that way this weekend. On top of that, we saw 2 oil depots burning and more rail infrastructure hit. So it's getting very difficult, frankly, to keep up with everything that's getting hit inside Russia. And some of these attacks are deep inside Russia. In Nizhny Novgorod, the Kostovo oil facility that had one of its cracking towers hit yesterday. It's got 2, I'm afraid. So it'll only be offline 50%. That's 900 kilometers from Ukraine, 600 miles. That's not right across, that's not a target of opportunity that's just across the border like the bridge in Bryansk, right? Different situation entirely. Now, one of the more interesting or curious stories to come out of this weekend is the story of Dasha and Karina. Dasha is 21 years old. Karina's 19 years old, right? These are young, dumb kids. And they made it, they're TikTokers. They made a TikTok of themselves lip syncing a popular Russian rap song, which, by the way, is about freedom and choice and having a bright future, which is interesting to me. They lip synced this song in front of the burning Adler oil depot at Sochi. So right next to the Sochi airport is an oil depot called Adler. There's 2 beaches. There's the beach at Adler and there's the beach at Sochi. And Sochi has some areas, as I understand it, that are a little more upscale, where the more wealthy Russians go. But then as you get down toward Adler, it's like Wildwood, New Jersey. The water is dirty, there's a lot of kitsch, and anybody can basically afford a weekend there at some point in their summer holidays. So the place is filled with summer tourists, many of whom, I would point out to you, got there through the burning rubble of the Volgograd rail hub that had been hit on Saturday and may have lost an entire day of their week's vacation because they were stalled in Volgograd. So you finally get to the beach, right? You've lost a whole day. You're not getting your deposit back for that day. And then, I don't know, you meet a nice girl. You're walking along the beach at night. There's a golden honey half moon in the sky, Jala Luna. And then suddenly you hear, and a column of flame and smoke, 500 feet in the air, right, 250 meters, is staring you in the face. Visitors to Sochi said that they had to seek shelter under bypasses, overpasses. There's no subway system there. There's no where to go underground. And so they took shelter inside buildings and under overpasses, etc. Dasha and Karina make the terrible mistake the next morning of making a TikTok in front of the burning oil depot. They have both been arrested. They have both been arrested and are sitting right now now these are kids who made a TikTok. Was it stupid? Was it insensitive? Yeah, it was all of those things. Is it treason? I certainly don't think so. I certainly don't think so. The fact that in Ukraine during wartime, the people could turn out on the street and protest the actions of their government for the redress of their grievances and get those grievances redressed. While in Russia, a child with an iPhone makes a TikTok and sits in jail, tells you fundamentally the difference not only between autocracy and a functional democracy, but the critical difference between the Russian need to punish and the Ukrainian philosophy of growth. That's it, right there in microcosm. And frankly, my heart goes out to Dasha and Karina, and I hope that they just have to make a public apology and they're off the hook. But in all likelihood, they're headed to 8 to 15 years in a gulag for a TikTok. Their lives are over. So anyway, let's not be too sympathetic for them when you think about all the Ukrainian kids that have been murdered by these bastards in the last 3.5 years. So it's not quite the same, but still. Okay, now not only was the Volgograd rail hub hit on Saturday, causing all those Russian tourists to lose a day, thousands, over a dozen trains from the Far East, passenger trains from the Far East, go through that station. You're talking about a couple thousand people who lost a day of their summer vacation because of that rail hit. That was not the only hit on rail infrastructure in Volgograd this weekend. A fuel train was hit and the train burned in the station. That's a big deal. Now, something similar. Now, this is all in Russia's far, far east, right on the Pacific coast. There is a region of the Russian Federation called the Jewish Autonomous State. Now, there are not that many Jewish folks there. It's mostly Russian and Buryat people. But a train with 5 fuel cars did derail. We do not know why that happened. We don't know if it was an infrastructure repair issue, if it was a technical malfunction, Russia's having trouble getting ball bearings for the wheels on their trains. We don't know why it happened. It may have been partisan activity. We just don't know at this time. However, I want to point out to you, this territory is directly adjacent to the Amur province of Russia, right on the Chinese-Mongolian border. What did we say last week happened in Amur? Well, we had one plane crash, two helicopter crashes, one plane crash, 2 helicopter crashes, and another plane emergency landing. None of these appear to be partisan activity. I think that what's happening is when an empire dies, it dies from the edges in toward the center. The outlying provinces don't get a lot of attention as it is. In a wartime situation, they become less and less important. They get less and less equipment, less and less attention, less and less money. And as that money is drying up, as the basic maintenance on these things isn't even being done anymore, I think what we're seeing are the early effects of collapse. In the far outlying regions of the empire, things are falling apart. So we'll see. We'll watch that area for more of this stuff. But a fuel train was also derailed in the Far East, and those fuel cars also burned. Now, on the front line, the Russians are approaching Kupiansk. They've made a breakthrough. They've advanced a couple kilometers. It's a very narrow band, but they've made forward progress. Kupiansk is in the process of being evacuated. I've been in Kupiansk. The best hamburger I had in the country of Ukraine is at a hamburger joint in Kupiansk. So our thoughts and prayers go out to the folks in Kupiansk. In Berdyansk, which is in the temporarily occupied territories, the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine hit an industrial site there. We're waiting on a damage assessment and details. In Zaporizhia, the Ukrainian armed forces have liberated a village. So some progress for the Ukrainians in Zaporizhia. Minor progress. It's a tiny village. Russian Federation forces are pushing into the southwest of Pokrovsk and pushing hard. There is now an ongoing daily infiltration of the outlying areas of the southwest of the city. I would remind everybody, though, that we've been waiting 26 months now for Pokrovsk to fall, since Avdiivka fell. In that 26 months, it's taken the Russians that 26 months to progress the roughly 60 kilometers from where they started after the fall of Bakhmut and Avdiivka, and the cost of tens of thousands of lives. And we don't even know that Pokrovsk is going to fall anytime soon. Now, Patrick very correctly says street battles are taking place there from the videos on Telegram or wherever on the internet. And Patrick, that's my understanding too, right? Now, it's in the far southwest environs of the city, right at the edge where Pokrovsk officially begins. But that is what is happening to the best of my knowledge as well. The Russians are so afraid of the world and of anything like a perspective that is not their own, that in the temporarily occupied territory of Kherson, the Russian-appointed regional governor is insisting that anybody with a satellite dish trade it in for a Russian satellite dish that shows TV only in the Russian language, only with Russian propaganda channels. And so they are denying to the Ukrainians the right to have any information in their own language, which is ironic in its deepest core, because the excuse that the Russians have always given for invading Ukraine in the first place was to protect the rights of Russian speakers. And the Russians, like they always do as soon as they're in charge, immediately violate the rights of everybody else or simply deny them. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency has said that personnel at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant have reported explosions and shooting in the vicinity of the plant, and again urged both sides in this conflict to keep the fighting away from the plant, as it represents a major contamination concern should the reactor cores be breached, even by conventional explosives. Partisans are busy, boy. Not only did they burn a relay cabinet somewhere in the temporarily occupied territories this weekend, shutting down rail service on that line for about 16 hours. Additionally, they blew up a truck with 5 Akhmat mercenaries in Melitopol. Now, that is the second time that something like that has happened in the last month, about a month, I'd say, since the last time this happened. So the Akhmat brigades are being targeted in Melitopol very clearly. Zelensky announced sanctions today on 94 individuals and 5 entities. The targets were principally Shadow Fleet captains. So the captains of these Shadow Fleet vessels that are how Russia's getting around the oil sanctions. Finally, and you may be wondering why I didn't start with this. I'll tell you why. Because it's a big deal. Not only have we seen rail infrastructure, logistics hit, not only have we seen oil depots and oil refineries hit again, the Ukrainians are targeting air bases. And over the weekend, we had a very successful strike on the Saki air base. 5 jets, 2 fighters, and 3 bombers were hit by Ukrainian drones. Now, the Ukrainians reported that one of the fighters was destroyed, one was damaged, while the 3 bombers were hit. We don't know how many of the 5 aircraft are out of commission forever. However, in the world of sanctions where you can't get parts, there's a question as to whether or not they can repair these planes. Now, of course, they were all Sukhois, so that's a Russian aviation company. They make the original parts. But they include lots of Western components and lots of Western metallurgy. So it will be interesting to see if we get some video from this, just how badly they've been damaged or not. The tide is turning, DJ. And here's my best evidence for that. You ready? Why were these planes sitting out on an airfield in range of Ukrainian drones? Why were they just sitting out on the tarmac? We've got satellite images that show at air bases all over Western Russia, they are building concrete sheds for drone protection for the strategic bomber fleet, for the IL-76s, the transport fleet, etc. Why aren't they doing that in Crimea? Right, that's where the Saki Air Base is. Jankoy Air Base, we don't see any covers going up there. Saki Airfield, we don't see any covers going up there. The planes are out on the tarmac, sitting ducks. That's a different situation, Matthew. But it's related. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I think it's because the Russians are already giving up on Crimea. They know they can't hold it. They know that life there is untenable. The Ukrainians have sunk the landing ships and destroyed the loading terminal in the Kerch Strait that would let them use ships to get people and equipment back and forth. They've damaged the Kerch Bridge almost beyond repair so that only one lane is open for traffic, right? I think the Russians know they can't hold Crimea, and they're not putting any more investment into it. They've pulled the Black Sea Fleet out of there. They've ordered their officers and infantry, or officers and enlisted men who have families in Crimea to send their families home. I mean, that right there is the biggest indicator to me. If they're telling their officer corps and enlisted corps to send your families home, I think they know they can't keep Crimea. I think they know it. Okay, that's it for me. That's my top line news today. Before we go to questions and answers, let me just again thank the sponsor of tonight's live, Arn, who is a stalwart supporter of this channel. And I appreciate it, Arn. Thank you. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group, and of course the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk, Feisty, Maddie, Jay, Pete, and Travis. Thank you all so much. Okay, questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need. Again, guys, I did put out, it's like a 30-minute video of where I think the war is at right now. Not really where I think it's at, just more like how I'm trying to figure out where we're at is more what it is. If you don't have a free Patreon account, go get one and take a look at that video. And so what's going on? Hey, Scully. How big is Kherson and how much is occupied by the Russians? So, Dawn, there's Kherson City and there's Kherson Oblast or region, right? And Kherson region is big. I don't know the square kilometers off the top of my head, but it's probably like as big as, say, Dallas, Fort Worth, and the surrounding environs, right? Not as far out as to Lake Whitney, but just around Dallas, Fort Worth. That's the city and the oblast. The city was close to 1 million people before the war, if I'm not mistaken, and right now it's at about 50,000. And in fact, that number has probably dropped dramatically as attacks against Kherson City have ramped up. And all of Kherson Oblast is occupied by the Russians, except for where Kherson City is on the right bank of the Dnipro River, and some more territory around there. Thanks, Bip. So I hope that answers the question, Don. Yes, Matthew, the usage of the Garon 2, the jet engine, the jet-propelled Shahed variant that the Russians are building in Tatarstan, is on the rise. Both on Friday and Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, we saw 8 of those drones come in. And I don't believe any of them were shot down. They go at 600 kilometers an hour. Very hard to shoot them down with the same weapons you're using to shoot down the slow-moving Shahed Garon 1s. Very difficult. Yeah, Jim, I know the sentiment. Russia has rebuilt an airbase in Donetsk to launch drones at closer range. Good. Their work will soon go up in smoke. Ukraine loves letting the Russians fix shit and then blowing it up. I mean, they just love it. And they're very good at it. They are very, very good at it. What else is going on, guys? We have 4 minutes. Matthew, Kherson is divided by the river, but it's not divided equally. I want to say maybe 15% of Kherson Oblast is on the right bank of the Dnipro. 85% of it is on the left, something like that. And it's that 85% that's in the hands of the Russians, where they're taking away everybody's satellite dish. Oh, Feisty, I was going to make a video about that today. When we abandon reason and logic and facts, then we become susceptible to being victims to any con that comes along. And Russian society is falling into the superstitious trap of false religiosity, tarot card readers, psychics, every kind of con man that can pick the pocket of the Russian people has been given free rein to do it. And now the Russians are selling a cancer vaccine. As if you could invent a vaccine that would prevent cancers caused by genetics, cancers caused by environment, cancers caused by combinations of genetics and environment, cancers caused by diet, cancers caused by smoking, cancer. It's ridiculous. A cancer vaccine. Right, cancer isn't a virus, although some viruses are related to the development of certain cancers. So maybe you could do that, something like that as a prophylaxis. But look, it's nonsense. That's why I didn't do the video, honestly, because it's dumb. You have to be dumb. Right, a one-size-fits-all vaccine for cancers. It's crazy. The best thing you could do for yourself is get a little apple cider vinegar in your diet every day. You are not wrong, Mike Kelly. It's probably a money-making scam, Dawn. I find it very difficult to believe that Russian scientists have somehow cracked the miracle cure that has eluded Western pharmaceutical companies and the hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars we've put into cancer research over the last 30, 35 years. Okay. Chili, garlic, and ginger in the diet. I agree, Scully. I could not agree more. Okay. Not a can of cider, a shot of apple cider vinegar. Recommended by Hippocrates himself. Okay. So anyway, guys, it's 1 a.m. here in beautiful uptown Kyiv, and I'm going to call it a night. Thanks all so much for your time, your attention, and your participation this evening. If anybody can sponsor a live or is interested in sponsoring a live, the PayPal information is in the description. That would be very helpful. Or if you haven't joined the Patreon, maybe join the Patreon. That would be great. Those are the two things that keep this channel going. Thanks, everybody. Make it a great day.